elections. And I covered the real problem in Mexico and explained how the cartels control the politicians, the lawyers, the bankers, the military members, police officers, the media. I mean, they control everything, and the reason is fairly obvious. And now, on July 1st, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, otherwise known as Amlo, has been elected to be the next president of Mexico, and he's also refusing bodyguards, saying citizens will take care of him. And he's been riding around Mexico City in his Volkswagen. Now, two things that raise red flags are, one, you don't plan on doing anything to address the issues of the cartels if you're refusing bodyguards because it means that you don't think that you're at risk. And two, he's in Mexico City with his Volkswagen. Mexico City is a place that the cartels are very unlikely to try to assassinate a politician in. In fact, if you find maps of where certain cartels have control, there's no obvious dominance around Mexico City. But AMLO isn't staying in Mexico City forever, and that means he's either going to need bodyguards, and a lot of them at some point, or his objective is not to touch the cartels, which makes me skeptical for a number of reasons, which I'll be going through here soon. But as a further comment on AMLO doing away with his bodyguards, a security consultant and former Mexican intel agency agent said it's a total error. It's whimsical, not strategic. And this poses other issues because this Friday, the president-elect is due to meet with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, and top presidential advisor Jared Kushner in his offices located in an aging house with minimal security. Okay, let me address all of this. There's multiple cartels in Mexico, so just because he's getting rid of his security and his team, including a former Mexican intel agent, is nervous about that, doesn't really mean a whole lot. No president is just buddy-buddy with all of the cartels unless he's just completely looking the other way. Oh, look at that. Fury, as Mexico presidential candidate and now president-elect, pitches amnesty for drug cartel kingpins. Obviously, people in the political and business sectors of society are upset about this because AMLO's proposal is basically saying that as long as cartels aren't violent, they can continue to operate. And what that means is that as long as AMLO doesn't hear about the violence, the cartels can continue to operate. I mean, he seems to have this sense of the world, and I'm not sure if it's genuine or not, where he believes that everything and everyone can be brought to peace and tranquility. I mean, he acts as if cartels will stop warring with each other in their surrounding communities. He acts as if the narcotics dealings and the human trafficking and the child trafficking and the blackmailing and the threatening, he acts as if there's a way to get it all to just stop. And there's a way to ameliorate the maximum amount of it, but it's not with peace and love and tranquility. It's with military force and a zero tolerance policy and a full-scale assault on the puppeteers, among other things, obviously. But that's just a starting point. I mentioned certain factions of some cartels that should be considered terrorist organizations as well. And it's because it opens the door for new methods and a higher level of urgency when it comes to dealing with issues propagated by the cartels. And one last thing before I get into the real bulk of this story. Mexico President-elect Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador wants Trump at his inauguration. Now, 2 years ago, AMLO was railing against Enrique Peña Nieto, who's the current president in Mexico who has tight ties to the cartels, for inviting then-candidate Trump to Mexico. But now AMLO is inviting him to his inauguration. And part of me thinks that it's because he wants to mend relations with the U.S. and nail down some mutually beneficial deals on immigration and trade. But then you also see that AMLO said immigrants from all over the world have a human right to go to America, acting as if America is the world's social safety net. But it's clear that Trump won't agree with that, and neither should he, because it's downright idiotic. And it's clear that AMLO's motivations aren't as pure as we initially thought. Doing some more research, you'll find that AMLO has been oddly dismissive of the Sinaloa cartel's actions for well over a decade now, and the US intel community considers the Sinaloa cartel the most powerful drug trafficking organization in the world. And the LA Times called it Mexico's most powerful organized crime group. The Sinaloa cartel operates along the border of California, Arizona, New Mexico, and part of Texas, primarily the Del Rio sector of Texas, but it also extends deep into Mexico. So if AMLO wished to try something against Trump, this is the cartel that he'd do it with, and he'd take the same exact actions and support the same policies that he already has. But now, let me lay out some points that'll add a more concrete foundation to this notion. Back in 2005-2006, during the Mexican presidential campaign then, AMLO refused to address any wrongdoings by the Sinaloa cartel, simply saying that the killings and the crime were the fault of the government. And he did the same thing in 2012 when he didn't even mention El Chapo. However, one of the big incidents back in 2006 was when there were officers that were decapitated by members of the Sinaloa cartel, and AMLO was asked about it. The transcript is as follows. "Aren't you worried about what is happening with drug trafficking? I'm not answering that. We are in truce. Love and peace." He said, "We are in truce." "The narcos left a message to the government. What do you say?" "I'm not going to answer. I offer apologies to all. Love and peace." "Are you afraid to provoke the drug lords?" "I'm not going to answer because if I say A or B, they can misinterpret." "But aren't you worried about the climate of violence?" "What happens is that right now I'm at peace with my conscience." "Are you going to be able to fight the narcos?" "Well, this municipality is called Tenosec. It borders with Guatemala and Chiapas. We go later to Balacan, and later we will go to Ciudad del Carmen, so you can rest because you deserve it." "What does that matter when blood is running?" "I offer an apology, but the truth, the truth, the truth, the truth, the truth. You have the right to ask, but right now I'm on a voluntary media blackout." "And the drug trafficking?" "Love and peace." And this all reads one of two ways. Either as someone so terrified of the cartels that they don't even want to comment on it, or it reads as coming from someone who's trying to sweep it under the rug for other reasons. But prior to these killings, he was in areas heavily controlled by narco traffickers, and he didn't once mention them. He talked about other issues that were facing the communities in the region, but he never once addressed the cartels. In fact, while he was in Sinaloa, he said political corruption and white-collar criminals were to blame for the drug trafficking. So he didn't directly address the cartels, but he could be talking about the politicians that are corrupt and who are bought by the cartels and just let the cartels pretty much run the show. And he could be talking about the cartel members as being white-collar criminals, but he made a point to say it's those who govern Mexico that are truly the biggest criminals. And in an abstract way, he's not wrong, but it's also a diversion around the elephant in the room. And throughout all of this, there's ample reason to look at the fact that in 10 months, there were 114 Mexican politicians murdered by the cartels, and you could immediately think, okay, well, it makes sense that he'd not want to go after the cartels, but between 2006 and 2012, there was a shift, okay? In 2006, AMLO was a radical proponent of zero tolerance on drugs and using the military to fight against the cartels. But then in 2012, he called the military approach idiotic and said that we need to replace the war against the cartels with a loving republic. I mean, he even claimed that his approach would eradicate violence in 3 years. There is no rational reason to assume that that would work. And in the 2012 campaign, there were 3 primary candidates for the presidency, and the other 2 railed against the cartels, despite connections found between them and Nieto anyways. And this was while AMLO pushed his hugs not bullets strategy. And he all around refused to acknowledge the detriment caused by the Sinaloa cartel. So something happened between 2006 and 2012, and I don't think it was just that he became, as he would probably consider it, more educated or anything like that. I mean, he hasn't given a rational reason for any of his stances or his policies. It's just an ideological reason that he's given, and that's concerning. I mean, there's plenty of superficial reasons that could be conjured up to explain this, but I don't buy any of them because I don't think that a superficial reason explains motivations concerning something so deeply embedded in the political and social sphere in Mexico as the cartels are. I mean, the way amnesties worked for violent groups in the past is that they're given amnesty if they turn over their weapons. I don't see any cartel actually doing that. And if they hold on to their weapons, then violence isn't going to actually be ameliorated. So AMLO would just end up granting the cartels amnesty, assuming that he's dead set on that policy, which it appears that he is. So to conclude all of this, I mean, I'm really just worried about the state that Mexico will be in after AMLO is elected president, and obviously I'm worried about the state that they're currently in. I'm worried about the careless talk concerning policies with AMLO. I'm worried about his deflection of responsibility away from the cartels, and I no longer think that him simply fearing for his safety is a reasonable excuse for all this after seeing him get rid of his bodyguards and seeing how cartels control the politicians. Basically, if AMLO was not involved with the cartels at all, he wouldn't be getting rid of his security because the cartels would have wanted their candidate to win. And his amnesty plan is also favorable to the cartels without really taking much from them. And the fact that he won't talk about the cartels in public is another red flag. And yes, he could be so terrified that he decided to just stop talking about the cartels. He decided to offer amnesty, and he just decided to not get involved with any of that. But then AMLO really can't say he's free from cartel influence because, well, he's not. They're influencing his thoughts and his actions and his policies. And if he steps out of line and they threaten him, he'll be doing just as much work for the cartels as he would have been doing if they got to him just any time sooner. So even while AMLO is trying to be all about peace and love and tranquility, he's fueling the cartels. And having U.S. officials, including Trump, visit AMLO in a sketchy place in Mexico is concerning for obvious reasons. I don't trust the guy all that much. And on top of that, after seeing how little care he has for American sovereignty, I really don't trust him. So that's all for this video. I'm sure I'll be covering more perhaps this weekend on the meeting that, Pompeo and Nielsen and Mnuchin and Kushner will have with him. So thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to leave a like on this video to boost it up in the algorithms. Subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell. YouTube keeps screwing with subscribers and notifications and all that. So I don't know. See if you can figure it out. See if you can, make sure you're actually getting